My world was measured in Pantone color swatches and the precise angle of a centerpiece. For a decade, I had been an architect of fleeting moments, a high-end event planner in a city that celebrated success with champagne and deafening applause. I didn't build buildings. I built evenings. Flawless, unforgettable evenings that raised millions for causes I barely had time to understand before moving on to the next. My life was a series of meticulously managed timelines, a fortress of checklists and contingency plans built to withstand any imaginable social disaster. A missing keynote speaker, a vegan entree sent to the wrong table, a sudden downpour. I had a binder, a team, and a steely calm for all of it. My boss, Marcus, called me his miracle worker. I knew he meant it as a compliment, but lately, it had started to feel like a cage. The miracles were becoming rote. The thrill of a perfectly executed gala had faded into a dull, predictable hum. I lived in a state of perpetual, low-grade exhaustion, fueled by caffeine and the fear of imperfection. My apartment was a minimalist sanctuary of gray and white, a sterile recovery room from the sensory overload of my job. I was successful, respected, and profoundly, quietly lonely. Something was missing, a color swatch I couldn't identify, a feeling I couldn't schedule into the run of show. My magnum opus was to be the annual First Responders Gala. It was the city's premier charity event, held this year in the legendary Grand Majestic Hotel, a historic landmark of marble columns and vaulted ceilings. This wasn't just another party. It was a statement. My statement. For 6 months, I had wrangled vendors, curated menus, and designed lighting schemes that would make the city's heroes, the firefighters, the paramedics, the police officers, look like the royalty they were for one night. The guest list was a who's who of the city's elite, with the mayor as the guest of honor. Marcus was practically vibrating with excitement over the press and the high-value donors. For me, it was the peak of the mountain I'd been climbing my whole career. Everything was perfect. The floral arrangements were arriving, the sound system was tested, the custom monogram napkins were folded to a precise 45-degree angle. 24 hours until showtime. And then the rupture. It didn't start with a bang, but with a whisper. A faint, trickling sound reported by a suspicious janitor. I followed him down to the sub-basement, a labyrinth of century-old pipes and forgotten storage rooms beneath the glittering ballroom. The air grew thick, humid, and smelled of damp earth and rust. Then we saw it. A cascade of murky water pouring from a huge, corroded main pipe, as thick as a tree trunk. It wasn't a leak. It was a hemorrhage. A dark, ever-widening pool was consuming the floor, creeping toward a junction of electrical conduits that powered the entire west wing of the hotel. My fortress of checklists crumbled. My contingencies didn't cover biblical floods. I felt a cold dread that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. The perfect evening I had built was drowning before it even began, and for the first time in my professional life, I had no idea what to do. The hum of my normal life had been silenced by the roar of incoming water. The next few hours were a blur of frantic, useless activity. I was a general without an army, shouting orders into a phone that brought no relief. The hotel's on-call plumber took one look and laughed. A hollow, bitter sound that echoed in the cavernous basement. "Lady, you don't need a plumber," he'd said. "You need an arc." The city water department's emergency line was a maze of automated menus. Marcus was a constant, buzzing hornet in my ear. "Do you have any idea how much money is on the line, Sarah? The donors, the press. Fix it. You're the miracle worker. For God's sake, work a miracle." His voice wasn't concerned. It was accusatory. I was a faulty component in his grand design. My attempts to solve the problem with the tools I knew, authority, urgency, the promise of money, were like trying to dam a river with cocktail napkins. I stood in the grand lobby, staring at the polished marble floors, imagining them submerged. My career, my reputation, my entire meticulously constructed identity felt like it was being swept away by the current rising just a few floors below. That's when they arrived. Not with the frantic energy I felt, but with a heavy, purposeful calm. The fire department. They weren't here for a fire, but for a structural emergency. They moved with an economy of motion that was both mesmerizing and intimidating. They weren't here to save my party. They were here to save the building. Their leader, the captain, was a man who seemed carved from a different, more solid material than the rest of us. His face was a roadmap of long nights and hard days, but his eyes were clear and intelligent. He wasn't impressed by my expensive suit or the panicked authority in my voice. He listened patiently as I explained the catastrophe of the gala being cancelled, and then he looked past me, toward the stairwell leading to the basement. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a low, steady rumble that cut through my panic. "My catastrophe is a floor collapsing and 100 years of history turning into a sinkhole. Let's worry about that first." He turned to his crew and started issuing commands in a language I didn't understand but recognized as absolute competence. I felt my own authority evaporate. For hours, I became a ghost at my own event, haunting the periphery as the real work was done. I watched them wade into the knee-deep water, their movements sure and steady in the chaos. They set up industrial pumps, assessed the groaning walls, and worked under the threat of electrical failure with a focus that was almost serene. My crisis was about aesthetics and reputation. Theirs was about physics and gravity. Marcus finally arrived in person, his expensive shoes clicking with indignation on the marble floor. He surveyed the scene, the firefighters in their heavy gear, the hoses snaking across his perfect lobby. He looked at me, his face a mask of fury. "This is a disaster, Sarah. An utter fiasco." He spotted the captain directing his team near the basement entrance. "Who is that?" Marcus demanded, pointing. "That's the fire captain," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "He's in charge of the scene." Marcus scoffed, a dismissive, ugly sound. "He's just a fireman," he sneered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "Get him out of the way and find me an engineer who can actually fix this. I'm not letting some civil servant ruin my event." The words hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Just a fireman. The phrase struck me with physical force. I looked at Marcus, at his bespoke suit and his perfectly manicured rage, and then I looked at the captain. I saw the grit under his fingernails, the exhaustion etched around his eyes, and the unwavering resolve in his posture. He was the one holding back the flood, literally and figuratively, while Marcus worried about canapes and photo ops. In that moment, something inside me broke. Or maybe something was finally pieced together. The world of superficial, fleeting perfection that I had so masterfully curated suddenly seemed like a cheap, painted backdrop. This was real. The smell of the damp, the whine of the pumps, the quiet courage of the men in the water. That was real. My meticulously planned gala felt like a child's tea party in the face of it. I was standing at a crossroads, one path leading back to Marcus and the hollow world of appearances, the other leading toward something else. Something solid. I felt a wave of shame so profound it almost buckled my knees. I had been so consumed by my little drama that I couldn't see the real story unfolding right in front of me. I was on the verge of tears, not just from stress, but from a sudden, gut-wrenching clarity. I walked away from Marcus without a word. I went over to the captain, my steps feeling heavier, more grounded than they had in years. He was studying a set of old blueprints, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Captain," I said, my voice trembling slightly. He looked up, his gaze steady. "I'm sorry," I managed. This whole time, I've been thinking about the party, about the flowers and the seating charts." I laughed, a broken, self-deprecating sound. "You're down there trying to stop this whole place from collapsing, and I'm worried about monogrammed napkins." He didn't smile, but the hardness in his eyes softened. "Everyone's got their own emergency, ma'am." "No," I insisted, looking him straight in the eye. "You deal with real emergencies. I just manufacture them." For the first time, I felt the full weight of my own triviality. "My boss. He doesn't get it." The captain's gaze flickered over to Marcus, who was now angrily gesturing into his phone. He looked back at me. "Most of them don't." He paused, then said something that would change the course of my night and my life. "Last week, we pulled a little girl out of a wreck on the interstate. Her whole world was gone in a matter of seconds. We sat with her for 3 hours until her grandmother could get there. I held her hand while she cried." He looked down at his own hands, calloused and capable. "She was worried about her teddy bear. It was still in the car. We couldn't get it for her." He met my eyes again. "Right now, your gala is your teddy bear. It's the one piece of normal you're trying to hold onto while the world is falling apart. I get it. His empathy was a quiet, powerful thing. He didn't dismiss my problem. He understood the human need behind it. He saw me, not as a client, not as a nuisance, but as a person holding onto her teddy bear. And with that, the decision was made. It wasn't a choice anymore. It was an imperative. I turned my back completely on the world Marcus represented. Okay, I said, my voice clear and firm now. The gala doesn't matter. What do you need from me? Right now I work for you. A flicker of surprise, then understanding, crossed the captain's face. He gave me a short, decisive nod. I need to know the structural history of this wing. Who were the original architects? Are there older blueprints that show what's behind this wall? Suddenly, I wasn't a party planner anymore. I was a logistics expert, a researcher, a part of his team. For the next 6 hours, we worked in a state of seamless, unspoken collaboration. I used my intimate knowledge of the hotel, the very knowledge I'd acquired to determine the best placement for ice sculptures and string quartets, to help him save it. I found the hotel archivist's home number. I tracked down schematics from a 1920s renovation that were stored in the city records office. I coordinated with the hotel's terrified engineering staff, translating the captain's clear, concise needs into a language they understood. I became his dispatcher, his fixer, his conduit to the world outside the flooded basement. The wall between our worlds dissolved. He spoke of load-bearing walls and water pressure. I spoke of access tunnels and staff schedules. It was the most intense, meaningful work I had ever done. Marcus would occasionally appear, sputtering about liability and delays, but he was like a ghost from another life. I barely heard him. My focus was entirely on the task at hand, on the quiet, steady voice of the captain on the other end of my radio. Slowly, miraculously, the tide began to turn. They found a secondary shutoff valve hidden behind a wall, a detail only visible on the antique blueprints I had unearthed. The roar of the water subsided to a gush, then a trickle, then silence. The pumps began to gain on the flood. As dawn broke, casting a pale, hopeful light through the lobby's grand windows, the captain emerged from the basement, soaked and exhausted, but with a look of grim satisfaction. "It's contained," he announced. "The water's down. The structure's secure." A small, weary cheer went through the assembled crew. I felt a surge of elation so pure it almost made me dizzy. We had done it. Not I, not he, but we. The mayor, who had been on site for the last hour receiving briefings, came over to shake the captain's hand. He then turned to me, his expression one of surprise and admiration. "My staff told me what you did, Sarah. They said you were instrumental." Before I could respond, the captain spoke. "She was more than instrumental, Mr. Mayor. She was essential. We couldn't have done it without her." The gala went on. It was a stripped-down, slightly damp version of my original vision, but it happened. The ballroom was cleared, the power was stable, and the guests arrived, buzzing with the drama of the near disaster. Marcus was in his element, spinning the story to the press as a triumph of his organization's resilience, with himself as the hero who steered the ship through the storm. I watched him from across the room, feeling nothing but a vast, quiet distance. My victory had already happened, hours ago, in the dark and the damp, alongside a team of men whose names I didn't even know. During the award ceremony, I stood at the back of the ballroom. The firefighters, now in their crisp dress uniforms, were brought on stage to a standing ovation. I saw the captain among them. Our eyes met across the crowded room, and he gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It was a shared secret, a moment of acknowledgement that was worth more to me than all the applause in the world. Later, as the VIPs were being ushered into the ballroom for the main presentation, Marcus appeared at my side, all smiles. "There you are. They're about to introduce the mayor. Come on, we'll walk in with him." It was the moment I was supposed to have been working toward for months, the triumphant entrance, the validation of my success. But as I looked at Marcus, I felt nothing. Just then, the mayor himself approached, bypassing my boss entirely. He extended his arm to me. "Sarah," he said, his voice warm with genuine respect. "I heard the whole story from the captain, about what your boss said, about what you did next." He glanced pointedly at Marcus, whose smile had frozen on his face. "I think it's only fitting," the mayor continued, his voice carrying just enough for those around us to hear, "that you and I make an entrance together." My heart swelled. I looked past Marcus's stunned, disbelieving face and saw the captain standing by the doorway, talking with some of his men. He saw me looking and gave me a slow, genuine smile. It was a smile of pride. I took the mayor's offered arm, my hand resting on the fabric of his suit. As we stepped through the grand archway into the glittering ballroom, a sea of faces turning toward us, I felt a sense of peace and rightness wash over me, a feeling of coming home to a place I had never known existed. I had spent my entire life building perfect, temporary rooms, but in the heart of a disaster, I had finally learned how to build a bridge.